What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over several tips to hopefully help you play better in team game modes, so duos, trios, and squads. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, find it helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, comment down below which game mode in Fortnite is your favorite to play, like team sizing wise, and if you guys would like to use my code in the item shop, it is EvolveJake, and it's underneath the webcam at all times. So the first and biggest piece of advice I think is just that, or one of the biggest, is that you need to just still play well yourself. Regardless if you're playing solos or squads, Fortnite is Fortnite at the end of the day. It is not some drastically different game based on the team size. There are certain things that change and certain things that may become, more or less important. But at the end of the day, if you're good at fighting, you're going to be good at fighting regardless of the game mode. And if you're playing bad in fights just because it's squads, that doesn't change anything. Like, playing bad in fights is still playing bad in fights. So using, cover effectively, having good aim, timing well in fights, swapping your weapons well, all of these things are going to matter regardless of the game mode you're playing. And I think for a lot of people, it is important to keep this, in the back of your mind. Like, even myself, I think I play much worse in squads as like an individual player than I do in solos, because I'm more worried about like what my teammates are doing and trying to help them, and I'm not as like selfish as I should be at times. And so still just, keep in your mind that you need to play well yourself. And like I said, it's Fortnite at the end of the day. Solos and squads are a bit different, but a lot of what comes down to being a good player translates to any game mode. One thing that is kind of unique to team game modes is going to be team shotting, and how important this is. This just means like targeting the same opponent as your teammates. That way y'all can quickly, eliminate them. If you and your teammate, or, you and several of your teammates are all shooting at the same player, this will allow you to hopefully get a knock very quickly and give you a numbers advantage in the fight, which is going to be huge. And you can kind of communicate this with your teammates by just saying like the name of the skin or like a quick description of the skin. You could say the superhero skin or the green superhero skin, or you could say the red knight. Like, it just depends what it is, and the skin names that or just where they are. If you see like two players running and one's kind of behind the other, you could say, we're targeting the back one. And this is especially helpful when the fight hasn't even started yet. Like, if the enemies are unaware that you're there and you see an enemy team, if you're able to coordinate with your teammates and, target the same people and shoot at the same time and hopefully get a, quick knock to start that fight, it's going to make the entire fight so much easier. And in more chaotic situations, it can be maybe hard to set this up, but you can also just look at the tracers of your teammates' weapons and you can see exactly where your teammates are shooting and which one they're shooting at. So, it's not even something that you need to make an effort to work together on. You can just choose to shoot at the same target as your teammate, and that's going to hopefully get a knock faster for y'all, and then that will make the entire fight play out easier, because getting a numbers advantage or getting a knock on the enemy team is incredibly impactful for swaying the odds of the fight in team game modes, because you reduce their firepower. If you're playing squads and you knock an enemy, you've just reduced that team's firepower by 25%. If you're playing duos and you knock an enemy, you've just reduced that team's firepower by 50%. So it's a very significant cut in what they can do. And you also make the fight so much simpler and easier for themselves. The less enemies that you have to worry about or keep track of, the easier it is for you to play out the fight, And this makes team shotting even easier, because the less enemies there are to shoot at, the more likely it is that your team's firepower is going to, kind of consolidate onto the same targets. You're going to get knocks even faster, and then you're just going to build this advantage even into a more significant advantage over time. So getting the numbers advantage, just getting one knock, makes it easier to translate into two knocks, easier to translate into three. Like, it just makes the entire fight so much easier once you've eliminated or knocked one enemy on the team. And then the enemy team, on the flip side, if one of your teammates goes down, you have to worry about potentially reviving the player that was knocked. And this also just kind of makes the fight more complicated or chaotic for them, because, they have to decide, do we fight this? Do we revive? Do we back off? Like, you add so much more chaos to them. And then if they do go for the revive, now there's two people out of the fight or three people out of the fight, depending on how many are doing the revive. And that can be something that you can flex into an even greater advantage. If you knock player A and player B goes to revive him, player A and B are out of the fight, and now you're just fighting C and D. So for that 10-second revive, you have a 4v2 potentially in squads. So getting that knock, I cannot stress enough how big of a deal that is. Even if you don't knock an enemy, there's several times throughout the course of the game where the enemy team might have split timing for whatever reason, and identifying this and taking advantage of it can make your game a lot easier. So like, let's just say you're playing duos and you and your teammate are shooting, y'all are trading shots, but you get good beams on one of the enemies and then they kind of start to run away. That leaves their other teammate alone potentially if their other teammate isn't leaving yet as well. And so you and your teammate could potentially hop on the one that hasn't left yet, get that knock, and then now you have a 2v1 versus a player that was already weak and trying to heal. Also, like early game, one player might have scuffed their drop and you might realize this and know that like we can just hop on the one that already landed, or maybe they didn't even scuff their drop. But if an enemy team lands kind of split on the POI, like one is near you and your teammate and the other is kind of far away, you could try to fight the one closer to you, and then the one that's further away either has to just let that happen or try to run to y'all with less loot. So even if you don't get a knock, there's so many little moments like this throughout the course of the game where an enemy team will be split for whatever reason, and identifying that and taking advantage of it quickly is something that can just build that small advantage. Like, you have an advantage window there, but if you take advantage of it, you just have an even greater advantage that's like a bit more permanent for the fight. So just getting a numbers advantage, whether it's through a knock or just by capitalizing on some sort of bad timing that the enemy team has, is incredibly impactful in team game modes. Another thing that can really aid in this, or just really aid in fights in general, is going to be trying to get different angles than your teammates in fights, especially if it's a kind of medium range fight. But even in close range fights, this can be really helpful. I think you want to be close enough to your teammates to be able to help them in a fight, but not so close that you can easily be pinned down or easily be focused. Because if you and your entire team are just standing behind the same piece of cover, that makes the fight so much simpler for the enemy team. They only have to worry about one spot. They only have to worry about very specific angles. But if you're kind of spread out a bit and you can get different angles than your teammates, you're going to be able to take advantage of that and hopefully catch the enemy team off guard. But you're also going to be able to relieve any sort of pressure from your team if they are pinned down for whatever reason. So getting those different angles are really helpful. If you're chasing enemy players, trying to, and you have one teammate that's just straight following them, you might want to try to play to like cut the enemy off and get ahead of them, kind of like, especially if they're in like a building or something and you can kind of predict their path. Just little things like that can make the fight so much easier rather than just like straight following your teammates all the time or staying right on them all the time. Again, you want to be close enough to help, but not so close that you're just easily pinned down, So that's something that you kind of have to work on. Communication is also obviously going to be something in team game modes that's very important, but I feel like this is often kind of overrated at times as well. A lot of like helping your teammates in fights doesn't necessarily need to be communicated. Like I kind of talked about earlier with the team shotting thing, you can just look at what your teammates are shooting and then decide to shoot the same thing as them. You can choose to have good teamwork by just playing off your teammate and not necessarily needing to convince them to do things with you or even tell them that you're doing this. Just naturally playing off your teammates, you can have good teamwork even if it doesn't need to be communicated. And that kind of like non-verbal communication or like non-verbal synergy, I think really comes just from playing the game a good amount and kind of being aware of what people want to do. But communication is still going to be important. A lot of people just focus on calling out enemy locations, which can be helpful, but the way some people go about this is not great. The most common call out you'll see in probably any shooter is just people saying that he's right there. And that doesn't really mean anything to anybody except for the person saying it, because we're not all looking at their screen. If they like mark a location and say they're right there, that, that's different. But being more specific with your callouts, whether it's like he's to the right, he's to the left, he's behind the trees, behind the rock, whatever, and using the pings as well can be really helpful. But in general, I think there's much more that goes into communication than just enemy locations. Like communicating what you want to do, I think is also really helpful. A lot of people just kind of go off and do what they want to do. And if everybody in the team is doing that without communicating with each other or playing off each other, then y'all are going to be very split. Another thing that can be really helpful is if you get split from your teammate for whatever reason, letting them know that, like, hey, you're a bit ahead, I'm not there to help you. they're probably going to slow down a bit, whereas otherwise they might not have noticed this. This can happen a lot this season, or just any season with mobility, especially if you have varying rarity gloves. If your teammate has mythic gloves and you have blue gloves, y'all are going to get split timing a lot of times, and making sure your teammate is aware of the fact that you can't necessarily help them is very helpful, because if they go into a fight expecting help right away and it's not there, they're probably going to end up losing, or at least playing that fight very differently than they would have if you had made them aware that you weren't able to help them for whatever reason. Another thing that can be helpful to communicate is damage that you've done to enemy players. Not necessarily every bit of damage, but if you break shield on one, if you hit one like 100 damage, letting your team know that informs how the fight is going for your team, and maybe whether or not you want to push, especially in duos, because like if you hit 200 in duos, you can probably hop that, get that player out of the game, and now have a 2v1, right? And this also goes in hand in hand with team shotting. If you get, the green superhero, if you have him cracked, and then everybody looks and shoots the green superhero, you're going to get that knock. Letting your team know which players are weak, I think is really, really beneficial. Another thing that could maybe be helpful is what type of loot the enemy has. This will vary season to season, but this season, if one player has the grappler and you know that, and your teammates don't, letting them know like, hey, the Superman skin has the grappler, maybe would change how they want to play the fight or how they intend to play the fight, because the grappler is like a very good item. I talked kind of earlier about teamwork somewhat, and how a lot of it kind of just comes down to playing off your teammate. If you decide to have good teamwork with your teammate, the entire game is going to be a lot easier. And this is something that I do. I talked at the start of the video about how like I don't play selfish enough sometimes in team game modes. A lot of times I just want to play off my teammate and play to help them, because I feel like that's the easiest way to have like decent teamwork. Especially if it's duos. If it's duos, all it takes is one person playing off the other, and then y'all have decent teamwork. But a lot of players kind of want to just do what they want to do and expect other people to play off them. And when you have an entire squad of people doing that, you're basically going in 4 different directions, and things aren't really going to work out. So if you find yourself in that situation a lot, just be the one that's going to take more of a backseat and play off of your teammates more so than expecting them to play off of you. And as I said, in duos especially, this will make things a lot easier. The next thing should go without saying, and that is just going to be to share loot. I get comments like this sometimes on videos whenever I play, squads or duos, and people are like, wow, nice to see you share big pots with your teammates. Mine would never do that. If that's the case, you probably want to find different people to play with, because it should not be noteworthy at all to like share, ammo or heals items with your teammates. So it goes without saying. Everybody in your team, being healthier and being able to be more relevant in the fight is going to make the game easier for you. And then one final thing I want to talk about is going to be the reboot situation, because in Chapter 6 Season 2, Fortnite made it to where you can buy reboot cards at the reboot van to get your squad back, and you no longer need the card itself. If you get the card, then you don't have to spend gold to get it. But what this does is it makes retreating and resetting and rebooting your teammates more of an option. Because before, if you got a knock on an enemy team and you thirsted them, you could just kind of chill on their card, and the enemy team would have to come back to get that card But now they can just leave and go buy the card, and most players have so much gold that this isn't really much of a problem for them. And I think one of the main ways this changes the game is that you need to be more quick in deciding about whether or not you're going to chase an enemy team. You don't always need to chase an enemy team and prevent them from rebooting, especially if it's one that doesn't matter. My kind of preference, or my thoughts on this, is if I fought a good team that I think was a hard fight, and then one gets away, we killed 3 and 1 gets away, I really want to get that one, eliminate them, and get them out of the game. But if we fought a team that was just like whatever, it didn't really seem like they were the greatest players, I don't really care that much about chasing it. Chasing at times can be a mistake, and you need to be, thoughtful on whether or not it's worth doing. But if it's a dangerous team, I think getting them out of the game is important. And a lot of times if someone slipped away and is going to reboot, being aware of the reboot vans in the area, the direction they left in, you can kind of predict which van they're likely to go to. And then if you do hear the reboot go off, you might know, okay, they're coming from, what's a POI? They're coming from Demon's Domain, and then you could try to like cut them off or like predict where they're going to go, especially if they went into storm to reboot, which is a very viable play because the storm doesn't hit for a lot of damage until pretty late in the game. If they go into the storm to reboot, you can still kind of predict where they're going to come out of zone and kind of try to play to hold them in zone and get them out of the game. And as I've already said twice, I think whether or not you should over chase here or really worry about preventing the reboot is just how dangerous you evaluate that team to be. If you think it's a good team, I think it's best to just finish them and get them out of the game. If it's one that's kind of meh, then it doesn't need to be as much of a priority. But that is going to be it for this video. As always, if you guys did find this to be helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.